Welcome back to Chapter 3 of the West, a narrative, combined narrative. We're going to be we've been talking about Aegean civilizations, and now we're going to be talking about the Mycenean mentors. I'm Christina Morgan, and we're going to keep journeying on. Let's see, part 2. The Myceneans, they're considered Greece's first civilization. So last time we talked about Minoans, which were on Crete. Now we're moving up to Greece proper. Mainland Greece, there on the Peloponnese Peninsula, about 1600 and 1200 BCE. They're descendants of the Indo-Europeans. The Mycenaeans established a militaristic kingdom in a Greek environment that's not really easy to make a living in or survive in. If you remember, the Minoans were merchants. They were peaceful type society, and now we're going to look at a militaristic society. The Mycenaeans were warlike, very patriarchal, nomadic herders with no seafaring or maritime experience. So this is very opposite of the society we found on Crete, which in some ways makes sense. Crete is an island, so you really need to have seagoing experience on an island. There was no evidence that they were ruled by Crete, but the mythology suggests that there was some kind of dominant relationship where the Minoans had some kind of superior power over the Mycenaeans. One example is the myth of Theseus, there's a myth of the Minotaur, which is a bull man, half bull, half man. And there were youth that were sacrificed each year. They had to go to Crete, and they were sacrificed into this labyrinth, which is a maze, and Theseus escapes, but the whole story suggests this kind of dominant relationship. Like their counterparts in the Middle East and Egypt, the Mycenaeans had a central control, elaborate bureaucracies, and were very militaristic. Their palaces were cities with walls, like we saw in Sumer and those other city-states, so that when they were under siege, the population could retreat into those walls and be safe. The citizens or the men were buried with weapons, armor, they had chariots, they sold weapons, so this was very much a society built around military lifestyle. Greece's mountainous terrain hampered political unification among the city-states in that area. It encouraged competition for the resources, which were very hard to come by. And the business relationships that they tried to get with other city-states, it made fierce rivalries. So there's a lot of people competing for a little bit. So it made it very hard for them to have any kind of unification or come together, work together. So they were very divided. The kings were rulers of great trading enterprises, but unlike the Minoans, where they saw themselves as merchant princes, these were aggressive military leaders. You also had something called tholoi, which were these burial mounds that later become shrines for their great leaders. This is where we see the linear B that we talked about before developing, which is how they're writing. It's a task of record keeping. And we had 1,200 linear B tablets survive a fire in the city of Pylos. It was just inventories of supplies, but it revealed a lot about the way these people lived. You'll see it says showed that wheat and barley were the staples of their diet. They also were given wine and figs. It doesn't mention meat a lot, but we know that there had to be a lot of animal slaughter to produce so much leather that they were making for all the armor. There were a lot of agricultural products being made for export. It showed that there was a great surplus of weapons being made, so that they were dealing in arms, selling them to other city-states, and that there were a number of weavers attached to the court. It mentioned a lot of specialized professions, so we know that they had this kind of specialty among their citizens. The peasants may have been semi-free laborers. It wasn't necessarily a servant class that where they were restricted. It showed that slaves were plentiful because they were warlike, so they were conquering people, but they were mostly female because after a battle they would have killed the men. So this was all learned from these 1,200 inventories. This is the Lion Gate at Mycenae. It's a very Mesopotamian influenced structure. So this is what we learned about Mycenae, which is another Greek predecessor or the earliest Greeks. So coming up, we're going to see an Aegean Dark Age, the Homeric era, and the beginnings of the Hellenic era. So that's coming up in part 3. Thank you guys for tuning in.